I often wonder about the nature of reality, about our relationship to the creative force that forged the particles of our stars and intertwined them with the molecules of our bodies. Who are we? And where are we actually sitting within the architecture of our universe? Are we alone? Or is the answer simply stranger than we can think? My name is Jeremy Corbell. I seek to weaponize your curiosity, and if you're ready to suspend your own prejudice, welcome to the world of extraordinary beliefs.
Explosive stuff is coming out. I mean, something's going on right now. Can you talk about that?
If everything goes as planned, I think we are on the eve of something momentous that will change on a tectonic level, the UFO subject. It's going to reveal some things that have been going on for a long time.
Government involvement in studying the phenomenon itself.
It's beyond just lights in the sky or radar returns. They've been investigating and looking into associated phenomena, things that occur in proximity with what we call UFOs, things that you would think the government would find too far out, but which are intrinsically related to what we see in the sky. It's been funded by American taxpayers without their knowledge, but I think it's about to come spilling out.
If it does, will any of the fingers be pointing toward Skinwalker Ranch?
It took 2 decades for this story to even begin to open up. And what's most interesting is how it relates to what's happening now.
There's a whole fleet of them. Oh my gosh. It's rotated.
What is the link between the current releases by the Department of Defense using the New York Times to get out 2 videos, now 3? What is the connection between that and the ranch?
So it's kind of a long and winding road with a lot of acronyms involved, but here's the basics. December 2017, the New York Times breaks a story about the existence of a secret UFO program in the Pentagon. And while many of us have long suspected they had something going, we didn't know exactly what it was. Well, it turns out it's something called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. A guy named Lou Elizondo comes forward. He says he is the point man for this program. In addition, we learned that there was a contract given out, and it involved BAS, Bigelow Advanced Aerospace, within Bigelow Aerospace here in Las Vegas, and that a study had been conducted, $22 million, and that part of that study focused on Skinwalker Ranch. A lot of people assumed that ATIP and BAS were almost synonymous, that the money for ATIP and BAS came from the same pot, that it was the same program. Fact is, it wasn't. BAS was involved with something else. BAS was under a much larger program, the existence of which has not been made public yet. But BAS was not part of ATIP. ATIP did communicate with BAS. There was exchange of information back and forth. But it wasn't ATIP that went to the ranch, it was somebody else. BAS investigators went to the property, investigated it, interviewed witnesses, collected evidence, much like NIDS had done before, National Institute for Discovery Science, which, while many people suspected it was a government program, was not. It was completely funded by Bob Bigelow. He bought the property, he hired the people to be there, he conducted studies for more than a decade, he owned the ranch for 20 years and sold it in 2016. NIDS was private, BAS was public, in that it was funded by taxpayer money, and that came from a program whose name has not yet been made public.
The BAS program to study the ranch, we were told DIA ran that program, but you're telling me that there's a host program to ATIP that actually was funded by that $22 million.
I don't know if ATIP is a DIA program, but I can tell you that BAS was under DIA. DIA put out the contract, BAS won the contract, and with that contract and those federal dollars, they studied the ranch, among many other things.
So there's a host UFO program that was funded with taxpayer dollars to study the phenomenon. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
What's the name of that program?
I can't say.
Do you know?
I can't say if I know what it is.
But somehow you know that this is true.
I think it is true. Yeah, it is true. But
you think it is true or it is?
It is true. I'm just not in a position to say much more about it right now.
Will we be learning more about this soon?
That's my intention, and I think it's the intention of some other people who know about it.
What's the connection specifically between Skinwalker Ranch, the 22 million, and the videos that were released to the public showing unknown craft of unknown origin?
Skinwalker Ranch was an inspiration for this secret Pentagon study, the $22 million that we heard about from the New York Times. Personnel within the DIA had read the book, had learned about what was going on there from the NID study, became interested in the property, went to the property. Some of these folks had their own experiences. They went back to Washington. They talked to Harry Reid and said, hey, this needs to be studied. Reid consulted with some of his colleagues in the Senate, got their approval to come up with the money for a budget. The program, a proposal was posted on Fed Biz Ops. Bigelow, Robert Bigelow, put together his own organization, bid on it, and got the contract. And that's where the $22 million went. A lot of that money was spent at the ranch. So it sort of came full circle. The people who were inspired by the book about the ranch got a program together that ended up going back and studying the ranch. But they studied a lot more than that. It was a much bigger program than just looking at the ranch. It looked at a much bigger spectrum of UFO-related issues.
Because of the events surrounding and at the ranch, the Defense Intelligence Agency got interested, partnered with private industry, with Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace. They created an organization and they implemented a strategy to begin to understand what's going on at the ranch, what we call paranormal or UFO. That was actually done. That was a government program.
It's a government program, and we call it paranormal. And people would assume that's something mysterious that we'll never understand, that's beyond science. It's just that we haven't figured out how to categorize it yet. Science is really great at figuring out the physical, the material world, things that we can measure and quantify and see and feel. We can figure that out. Things beyond that, we're not so good at figuring out. That's what this study at the ranch was trying to deal with, is to figure out what these phenomena are, what generates them, are they intelligent, and if so, where's this intelligence from? That spills over a little bit with what ATIP was doing, which is it has these instances where things interact with our military over nuclear missile bases or over carrier groups. The reports come in, and they try to figure them out.
Somehow you had knowledge that there was going to be a complete watershed moment where information was put out through the Department of Defense about UFOs. As a journalist, you had prior knowledge about that.
Skinwalker Ranch was the impetus for the Bass study. And the Bass study not only looked at the ranch, but a lot of broader topics related to what we would call paranormal and UFOs. In addition, at the same time, there was a parallel program, ATIP, which dealt specifically with military sightings and military encounters, that was running along a parallel track. Not the same program, but they exchanged information.
So there's a host UFO program, and we're going to learn more about that.
Hope so.
You also mentioned that people within the DIA came to the ranch out of interest to try to understand if there was some sort of capability or threat to what we call paranormal, but whatever the events are at the ranch, that people came there from the DIA.
Can't say. I don't even want to use that word. I don't even want to get so yeah. But you can ask about DIA being there. But
you mentioned people from the DIA came to the ranch to look at the phenomenon of what was going on, to try to understand if there was some sort of threat to what we call paranormal, but whatever the events are at the ranch, and then that they had their own experiences. What do you mean by that?
DIA personnel have been on the ranch, and they did have their own experiences, what we would call encounters with the paranormal. And those experiences were dramatic enough that it convinced them this was worthy of further study. It followed them, stuck with them after they left the property. I've heard the term used, hitchhikers, that something attaches to them and follows them home.
So Skinwalker Ranch and the study of Skinwalker Ranch by Robert Bigelow and the partnership with the Defense Intelligence Agency, they're looking at this because they feel it is important, that there's something to be learned, that there's something going on there that is of national defense interest. That's wild.
Yeah, like ATIP is dealing with national security issues in a direct way. What was going on with Bass and the ranch is dealing with national security issues in a much broader sense. Maybe it's not a direct threat. Could be. There's an intelligence operating there. It's shown remarkable capabilities. It seems that whatever this intelligence is, it can access our physical reality at will, and there's not much we can do about it. So that's of interest to national security people. But it's of broader interest to scientific minds of how the universe works, the nature of reality itself, beings, other intelligences, our place in the universe, in the cosmos. So there are a lot of big brain people who were happy to take on this issue, not because it was a national security issue, but because they have inquisitive minds.
Were there other intelligence agencies or other nations that were interested in what was going on at Skinwalker Ranch?
Ever since NIDS was there have been rumors that NIDS itself was an intelligence agency or working for an intelligence agency, and that's just not true. This was entirely Bob Bigelow's program. But throughout the known recent history of the Uinta Basin, there have been sightings of what we would call men in black types, military types who were there checking out the ranch, checking out the larger basin, helicopter flights over the property. It seemed like it had been of interest to someone for a long time. In addition to people that we would think were our government, I am told that there was interest from other governments. After the book came out, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, that property attracted attention from a lot of different people, not just UFO buffs.
What could other nations want?
I don't know. I mean, if you're looking at wormholes and portals, time travel, exotic technology that can get you from A to B in a big hurry, maybe that's what they're trying to figure out. Same as sort of the larger study ATIP was doing for the Pentagon, trying to figure out how these machines worked, how they could accelerate as they did, appear and disappear, seemingly defy the laws of physics as we know them, or the laws of aerodynamics. That's pretty good info to figure out. That's a good mystery to crack if you're in a national security establishment.
The locals that we've spoken with recently, they are in distress. They want to know if the illnesses and the experiences of craft burning people's faces, are they government or are they truly what we'd call paranormal? People want answers. Is the government responsible for what's been happening to the community there?
Well, the phenomena in the Uinta Basin has been going on since before the United States government existed, since before there was a U.S. military. The first humans there have reported the same kinds of things far back as the 1770s, maybe further. So the government didn't create that. Bob Bigelow didn't create it. It's been going on for a long time. Could some of it have been created by the government? Sure. Could the government carve up a cow? Sure. But, the NIDS folks determined that it wasn't a hoax by the family. They had a broadened circle of witnesses. It was not just a couple of people. It was thousands of people who had seen this phenomena over decades. There is physical evidence that was evaluated. We mentioned that in the book. And the NIDS guys investigated a lot of it. This is a physical thing that comes into our reality and leaves physical, measurable traces. And there's a lot of evidence of that. It manifested itself in many ways.
We've been warned from going to the ranch and the surrounding area to hunt the phenomenon. Yet, as a journalist, you've been doing this for decades. Does that concern you at all?
It's starting to concern me, yeah. I mean, I try to prepare myself for these trips that we make, and I'm respectful of whatever it is that's there, and I don't want to take anything home to any loved ones, but most of the people who've gone there as many times as we have taken something with them, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm not sure how many more times I'm going to be going there. I think this might be either the last or one of the last times I go. I get a little concerned about it. I'd like to see something, because I've been there a lot of times and have never seen anything that I would categorize as paranormal or all that out of the ordinary. I'd like to see something, but I don't want to take it home with me.
As a journalist, to break stories, sometimes you have to keep secrets. You know something. You know something you're not really able to tell me. There's a parent UFO program.
There's another program. Whether it's a parent of ATIP, I can't say, but it's separate from ATIP. And that story has not been told yet. And I think it will come out. I think there are efforts to get that information out. And when it does come out, it's a lot of stuff.
So the government got wind of Skinwalker Ranch, what was going on there, and they did actively study the ranch to try to understand the phenomenon and try to understand if it was a threat.
The government created a pool of money, gave it to a contractor who hired the best people in the world to study this stuff, and one of their priorities was Skinwalker Ranch. And they were there to try to figure out the mystery. What is it? Where is it from? How intelligent it is? How does it do the things that it does? What are its intentions? I don't think they answered any of those questions, but they learned a lot. We know a lot more about it than we used to. But if you were asking, is the mystery cracked? No, and I'm not sure it ever will be. And I don't know that there's anybody in the world that knows the ultimate answer to it.
Bob Bigelow, international man of mystery, billionaire, aerospace mogul. He sold the ranch.
Bob sold the ranch. I'm sure he knows more than most of us do, most of the world knows, but ultimately does he know what it is? I kind of have my doubts.
Has he dropped the subject?
He has not dropped the subject. He's dropped funding the subject. He's not spending any more money on it. He's not funding any more studies. He doesn't want to own the ranch anymore, and he's got his own reasons for it. He told me he will be interested in this subject until the day he dies. It's different from being actively involved and spending millions of dollars and just having a casual interest as he does.
Clearly his curiosity was weaponized, but was his curiosity satisfied?
Tough to say. I think he's had some questions answered. That's my sense of it. But the ultimate answer, I don't think anybody knows.
How can you walk away from a mystery that's so big?
Well, there are risks. There are risks involved for those who pursue this stuff. And Bob's done more than just about anybody in the world. He has other priorities, not only business priorities, the space program, but personal priorities, family priorities. And I think they take precedence at this stage of his life.
Should people be grateful for what he did do? I mean, people are going to say he got in bed with the government, they did a secret study, the Defense Intelligence Agency, Bob Bigelow, Bass. I mean, is that the attitude we should take, or should we be grateful he did it at all?
We absolutely should be grateful he did it. He had the best team in the world. He had the only experienced organization that had ever done anything like this on this kind of a scale. And he put his own money into it. He lost money on it. This is not a moneymaker for him. He lost money on it. And it was doing a service for his country and for humanity and for science, and we should thank him for it. And he's got nothing but grief about it. Nothing but grief. That he's this, he's that, the shadowy Bob Bigelow. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Are you going to walk off camera again?
No, I am not. I'm standing here all goddamn day.
There's a host program. There's a bigger UFO program. Skinwalker Ranch was the linchpin to create what we're seeing today with the releases by the Department of Defense.